Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Pleasure to be with you and glad to get your phone calls and your emails. I actually got to see my friend Ann Coulter in person for a change last week in Washington, D.C., and now she joins us on the phone. And I guess, my wife hates the Mission Impossible movies, but I love them. But even going back to the TV series back in the day, it would always be, well, we're going to go after this guy or gal, and we're going to do something that will cause them to do something else, and then they plot out the series of reactions like a chessboard. Is the president doing this where he says, I'm going to have this phone call, I know they're going to ask questions about it, and then when they ask questions, they will demand a transcript, and they will think, but he's never going to give it up, and then I'll give it up, and then it'll make them all look like fools. Is he playing, five-dimensional chess?
Yes, I was going to say you seem to be easing into the 3D chess. No, his opponents are zealots. I mean, they're not stupid people, but they are just such zealots. I was watching Rachel Maddow last night, and I mean, she's just hysterical that he talked to a foreign leader. As if that's the impeachable crime. He's talking to a foreign leader. We said, did you make the call? He said, yep. Well, no, who done it here? I mean, they really, everything he does, he is an offense to them. They find his being, the fact that he is in the White House, and worse than that he replaced Obama in the White House, they just find it so appalling. I mean, as I describe in my column this week, you can see exactly what's going on. And to some extent, that explains all the hysteria from the moment that he came along. But the Russia investigation by the FBI was always a political hit. At first, it was being used to try to prevent Trump from winning the election. And then it was used to cripple his presidency. And if you look at the timeline of it, which I go through in my column, there's more detail on various aspects of it in Resistance is Futile, but this is just, point. This is how it proceeded. And the media and the opposition party have been trying to take Trump out, basically because they find him icky and think that is an impeachable crime. We don't like him. We can't stand this. Anything he does, anything he says, and wow, there's plenty to complain about with this guy. But the zealotry overcomes the Democrats and overcomes the media. So he's just, it's a cliche, but in this case, it's very true. He is lucky in his enemies.
Well, it's one of the things they loved about Obama. I didn't particularly care for Obama at all. But he would run lines like, well, because of my unique nature, both half black, half white, and some Muslim roots and a stepfather in Indonesia and all this stuff, I will be able to go to other regions of the planet and speak to people, and they will sit down and make unique, special deals that will solve a lot of our problems because of my unique ability to communicate. Well, he never really got much done, but Trump, on the other hand, could have said the same thing. I've had 40 years of cutting deals. Let me cut some deals. And they all went, how's Yu Jun? Well, he's a businessman. Why, he hasn't done anything. Well, he did a lot more in the first 10 years of his life, or 20 years of his life, than Barack Obama ever did in his life. And they didn't seem to accept that, yes, he would be talking to foreign leaders and would occasionally say, I need some things done. Like, can we find out why one of our vice presidents is running around the country bragging?
Too much detail on this.
I'm sorry.
Completely insane. You're trying to analyze the mind. This is like talking to a schizophrenic. I mean, not you. That's what you're trying to do. This is insane. I think we don't need to explain to Americans that the President of the United States talks to world leaders, gets things from them, including investigating corruption, which quite clearly that Biden issue was. There was no quid pro quo, and I'm not really sure it would have made a difference if there was a quid pro quo. They just can't stand his existence. Anything he does, they're going to scream impeach. And the real story here is their hysteria and zealotry and how they've been going after this guy since during the campaign. There is no explanation. It is very curious that the FBI keeps throwing out different explanations for why they were spying on the campaign of a presidential candidate. I mean, that is truly shocking. and and they pump new life into it, and then one explanation falls apart. They were examining the DNC servers, and but we never actually looked at them after they were hacked. And then James Comey drops the dossier into the news. We heard about that for 10 solid months. 10 months on television. Absolute hysteria, as if the famed Russian dossier was going to finally expel this monster from our site. And then it took 10 months and a court order to find out that that dossier was funded by Hillary Clinton. It was nothing but a political hit job. Then we get the Strzok and Page emails, and I'm sorry if I'm boring your listeners.
No, not at all.
Quickly go through the timeline. As soon as they found out the dossier was paid for, and FBI can't use that as an excuse anymore. Then they jump on the Papadopoulos story. Okay, now everybody's changing the channel, but the point of the Papadopoulos thing is how utterly silly it is. They're down to their last excuse. That's what Trump was asking about. It wasn't taking a lot of time. It wasn't a big initiative. But both the Ukrainian and the Australian leaders were being used by the FBI as excuses for the Trump investigation. They were offhand comments. He has other things he needs to do, like build the wall. But focusing on those transcripts shows, forget the corruption of Biden, it's the corruption of the FBI and the deep state trying to take out a presidential candidate and being indignant that the American voters chose a president whom they don't approve of.
No, and what I guess what I keep wondering is they never seem to think they're going to get caught. I mean, Strzok and Page are like, well, we can't let him get elected. We got an insurance policy. And in this case, I guess if Adam Schiff knew the gist of the complaint and just said, well, we'll just take the complaint and that's a description of what the president said and what he demanded, and we'll take it as, without even bothering to say, I wonder what the president actually did say. They either believed it or thought, we can sell this to the American public, like the dossier was an attempted sell, and nobody will ever find out what was actually said in the conversation because Trump will never release the transcript. Well, he almost immediately released it, and it blew up their whole game, I think.
Yes, it did. That's why you won't hear much about the transcripts. As I said last week, they'll talk about anything but what was actually said in these phone calls. They do not want people hearing what was said in the phone calls. It will remind everyone, as I say, what is really going on. It's the FBI trying to overturn a presidential election. Well, trying to prevent one candidate in a talk about interfering in an election. That was our own FBI. I mean, not the whole FBI, but apparently a lot of them, a lot of them based in Washington, and a lot of them right there at the top. And I'm just delighted to find out from seeing the transcripts of these calls that Bill Barr and Donald Trump and Secretary Pompeo, in their to-do list is, let's get to the bottom of why the FBI was investigating Trump.
No, it makes perfect sense to me. I guess I wonder where Nancy Pelosi is figuring out how this is going to benefit the Democrat Party, because she's already said, oh, if we lose the House, that's okay. And I thought, well, that's the first time I've ever heard that from a House Speaker. Oh, yeah, we lose the House, no big deal. It's worth it to go after the president, because they think they're going to take him down, even though they're going to send this over to a Senate, and they're not going to get 20 Republicans to vote for conviction, are they?
No, I have very little respect for most elected Republicans, but even I do not think they are that stupid. I mean, what do they imagine the refigured Republican Party is going to look like if these guys vote to remove the duly elected president? But I will say, Nancy Pelosi, I mean, the Democrats are in a tough spot. They've ginned up their crazies. Their crazies are demanding impeachment. They got to keep the crazies, passionate and out there beating up Republicans. They need that passion and energy. On the other hand, that's all they're going to get, and you could end up with. You could end up with following the George McGovern.
They're going to get a disaster on their hands.
In other words, he either got it totally wrong, made it up, or the person giving the information to the whistleblower was dishonest. And this country has to find out who that person was, because that person's a spy, in my opinion.
Absolutely right. Donald J. Trump, the president of the United States, responding to some of the latest information about the so-called whistleblower and the promise by Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, that there will be a vote on impeachment before Thanksgiving. Don't hold your breath for that, but she might get it done by Christmas time. Donald Trump is under constant attack from the Democrats, throwing everything but the kitchen sink at him. He runs, frankly, the best country on the planet by my measure, and he's running a re-election campaign that is raising massive amounts of money. So with all this to deal with, what is going to be the response to this impeachment inquiry, so-called?